What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and every year we spend hours and hours talking about hundreds of players and late round targets and middle round fades and early round studs. And really, at the end of the day, every fantasy football season comes down to probably 10 to 20 players. And what I mean by that is when we look at ESPN championship rosters, only 38 players over the last 2 years have been on 15% or more of those championship rosters. Now, of course, it's great to hit on your early round pick, right? You can get CeeDee Lamb early, Jahmyr Gibbs early. You can get Amon-Ra St. Brown in 2023 early. Last year, you had Saquon Barkley. But the guys that really put teams over the top that can match a Saquon, can match a Derrick Henry last year, are if you hit on the guys who get hot down the stretch, right? Last year's Bucky Irving, or last year's Jonathan Taylor, last year's Tyjae Spears. Those are the guys that truly win fantasy football championships. And when we look at it, the guys you can get for cheap that can add on to those foundational pieces are almost always younger players. When we look here in terms of these 38 players, 23.7% of them were rookies, going at an average ADP on ESPN of about 140. Then you have guys who are second and third year breakouts. That's like another quarter, going around pick 94 on ESPN. And then the year 4+ guys. These are your cornerstones in the NFL, right? Saquon Barkley last year. Really any player who's not ascending. That is 50% of the total of these players, but they're getting drafted at pick 38.4 in those first 3 rounds as an early round pick that you're building around, which are great, but the guys who are going to really put you over the top and you cost adjust this thing are these younger players. And what we're going to talk about today is going to be 7 players that I think can break out in fantasy football this year. They are going to be either year 1, year 2, or year 3 players, all drafted outside of the top 90 picks in ESPN. At least you can see here, years 2 to 3, average pick 94.1. So we're going to go out to the top 90 picks and talk about players that I think could end up on this list next year as guys you needed to have down the stretch. And the reason I wanted to make this video is because I've been doing a lot of here's my favorite players, or guys have been drafting a lot of, and I've been getting a lot of comments that are saying, well, are you kind of getting caught up in the dynasty hype, right? I talk about rookies in the offseason, and we talk about dynasty and future first, and we sort of get swept up in what these draft classes are. So I wanted to kind of get on here and talk about why I think even targeting these players now is a good move, right? I'm getting comments here. Is rookie dynasty hype getting to Ron in these redraft takes? Why are so many players you like rookies? And I'm going to pull up that chart again. We look here at, again, the players that were highest rostered on championship teams over the last 2 years. And in bold are all the rookies, right? Sam Laporta is on there, 23.1% of championship teams in 2023. Puka Nacua in 2023. Bucky Irving last year. Brock Bowers last year. Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors. Jaden Daniels even counts. Devon Achane in 2023. CJ Stroud in 2023. That's a big percentage. It's about a quarter of this entire list are just rookies. So that's why I'm targeting the rookies. And then again, with this chart, I'm targeting young ascending players as well because they take up about half of the population of these league winners or championship roster players at a much cheaper cost. So when we talk about our first breakout player on this list, we are going to go to Jayden Reed, who is going at pick 100 right now on ESPN as the wide receiver 48. And that is just a beautiful, beautiful price to pay for him, or he's actually going pick 78.7 over on Underdog, where I'm still drafting him there. I probably have him on like 12 to 13% of my teams, but in home leagues, right? And this is what this video is geared towards, because again, we can look at that first chart. It is pretty crazy, but you can look at Brian Thomas Jr. was going at pick 120 last year, and then on Underdog, he was probably like pick 70s or pick 80s. So that's why I think it's great to hop on Underdog, get your feet wet, get a feel for what the ADPs are on there, because guys like Tetairoa McMillan, Travis Hunter will go in the high 30s, high 40s, low 50s, and then you get to your home league and you look up and it's pick 70 and Travis Hunter's on the board, and it goes off in your head, wow, this is a huge, huge value. So if you want to kind of get sharp for your home league, make sure you check out Underdog. They'll match your first deposit up to $1,000 with promo code RON. I'll have links in the description and the comment section down below. But Jayden Reed and all these players on this list kind of represent the opportunity to take advantage of your home league ADPs. Now, I will say later in the offseason, probably like August, when these like really become official and Sleeper gets theirs and Yahoo gets theirs all locked in, we'll talk through a video of like the best values across the board. But for now, these are guys that stick out in mid-July. Now, Jayden Reed, the reason I like him, he's going into year 3. And to me, his role is questionable but I believe he's a talented player in a good offense first and foremost. When we look at his yards per out run in his first 2 years, 2.05, 2.2. Anything above 2 is really good for a receiver, especially a young receiver. Then you also have reception perception. Matt Harmon tracks these receivers against different kinds of coverages. 74th percentile versus man, 82nd percentile versus zone, 80th percentile versus press. So he's a very well-rounded receiver. He's efficient. He's explosive. Really, his biggest issue is that last year he was outside of the top 60 wide receivers in routes run. That was because he had about a 70-ish% route rate, which we really want to be like 90% plus as a full-time receiver. And then also it was a very low-volume passing offense. Now, why I think that can change is 2 reasons. First of all, I think that this offense should pass the ball much more than it did last year. I don't know why I can't speak. Much more than they did last year is what I'm trying to say, obviously. But you look at LaFleur, and you look at what he's done in Green Bay so far in terms of those passing offense numbers, right? So in terms of attempts, since he got there, 16th, 24th, 15th, 18th, 15th, and 30th. Last year was his first year outside of the top 25 in pass attempts, and it was only his second year outside of the top 18 in pass attempts. I think that we're going to see this offense be much more balanced. That has been Matt LaFleur's MO, and his MO as well has been scoring points. You can see his points per game numbers here: 15th, 1st, 10th, 14th, 12th, 11th, or 8th, my bad. He's never finished outside of the top 15 in points scored for the Packers. So I think there's going to be a balanced offense, a more pass-heavy offense than we saw last year, and they're always going to score points with Matt LaFleur. And we even have splits we can look at with Jordan Love last year, where after the first 5 or so games, he gets a groin injury. But before that, he averaged the 4th most pass attempts per game and the 2nd highest deep throw rate. And over that time span, Jayden Reed was at 18.3 points per game, which would have been good for a top 6 finish last year. Now, of course, they draft Matthew Golden. That's a bit of an issue, right? Because we need him to get out there in 2 wide receiver sets, or we need more 3 wide receiver sets. But with Matthew Golden, he's at the very least not a huge target hog. This is somebody who had 58 catches in 16 games in his final year at Texas. For comparison, Emeka Egbuka in a similar amount of games last year had over 100 receptions. So Matthew Golden, he's a separator. He's going to be efficient. He's going to be good, but he's not going to come in here and immediately get like a 25% target share. Dobbs has never really been that guy. Wicks has been pretty much, kept away at the bottom of this depth chart. Christian Watson off a torn ACL. So for me, you're betting on someone who finishes the wide receiver 38 in points per game last year in this role. You're drafting at wide receiver 48. We're going to see a more balanced offense this year. And then as a year 3 breakout candidate, if there was going to be a time for Jayden Reed to move up from 70% of the routes to 90% as a full-time receiver, it would be in year 3 where he gets fully unleashed, right? Can Matthew Golden now be a perimeter receiver with Romeo Dobbs, and it frees up Reed to not just be in the slot, but to be kind of moved all over in tandem with Golden, who can also move inside and outside. So we'll see how it works, but I just want to bet on, to me, what is a good player in a good offense. Now, this next player is a good player in a bad offense, but we have Josh Downs going at pick 112 as the wide receiver 51 over on ESPN, and Josh Downs is almost undeniable as a talent at this point. Last year, he was the wide receiver 28 in points per game, even with games with Anthony Richardson and games with Joe Flacco, and some games even a little bit banged up. He was still the wide receiver 28 that you're getting at the wide receiver 51 price tag here. He's going like wide receiver 46 on Underdog, so I'm even still drafting him there. And when we look at his per route stuff, he was 11th in PFF grade, 4th in targets per out run, 12th in first downs per out run, and 18th in yards per out run. So top 20 across the board. You can see here on this list where he's almost like he's not that far off of even a guy like Justin Jefferson on a per route basis, right? A little bit below his yards per out run, a little bit below his PFF grade, better targets per out run, better first downs per out run. Now, I'm not saying that he's as good or better than Jefferson. I'm just saying efficiency-wise, he's running with the top dogs in this league, which to me is very impressive given how many games he played with Anthony Richardson last year, who is a bad thrower of the football at this point in his career. And I think Bush over from Fantasy Stock Exchange makes a great point here, saying the Colts last year, when Richardson wasn't starting, or actually the last 2 years with Shane Steichen, they averaged, in terms of their pace over a 17-game season, over 600 pass attempts with Minshew and Flacco in terms of what those pass attempts per game numbers would have been over a 17-game season. Last year, there were only 6 teams with 600 or more pass attempts. So even if they come below that 600-plus pass attempt mark, which I'm expecting, but with more Daniel Jones and less Anthony Richardson, I think that we should see high 500s as at least like a balanced passing game offense and not bottom of the league. So to me, that becomes very exciting. I know Michael Pittman Jr. is there, but again, with Josh Downs, I just think you can't really put the toothpaste back in the tube with him. He's just a very talented player that can move around. I know that he can play in the slot, but I think he can also play wherever they need him to play. And at this point, again, he finishes the wide receiver 3 last year. You're drafting him as your wide receiver 5 this year in ESPN leagues. Then we have our first rookie on this list, Colston Loveland, going at pick 108 as a tight end 11. That's really not a big rookie discount for ESPN, but what I will say is that they push up the onesies. When I say onesie, I mean quarterback and tight end. I don't know why. I assume because with shallower lineups, right? Like, I'm just trying to think through it. If you have 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 1 flex, like a very shallow league, which is more of the standard, that does put more of an emphasis on the tight end than the quarterback, right? The more wide receiver spots, the more flex spots, the more diluted quarterback and tight end become. So I think that might be part of the reason, but I think it's just like across the board. They push up these tight ends. It's why Hawkinson's right next to Sam Laporta in the 60s, and there's no gap. And Loveland is going at pick 129.3 on Underdog. He's going at 108 on ESPN, but I think even on ESPN, I would still take him at that spot. He's actually been falling on Underdog recently because of a shoulder issue that kept him out of like competing at things in the combine, like the 40-yard dash. But we have a report today that came in from Underdog here. Colston Loveland shoulder feels 100%. TBD to be on the practice field for start of training camp. But Tom Christ underneath that, which shout out to him. 2 seasons ago, he would come on the channel every Saturday and talk through player injuries. He's great. He said very likely that he is and plays at 100% with no ill effects of surgery during the season. I talked in more detail in that post below. He's a great follow on Twitter. I think he's one of the more honest and open fantasy doctors or fantasy injury analysts out there. So it seems like Colston Loveland should be good to go for this season, which means his price right now is really nice. Right now, we have the Bears projected by Vegas for the 15th most points across the NFL. And yes, they have a ton of passing options, but none of them are super proven with the new regime, right? DJ Moore last year led the NFL in design targets. That's not going to be the same with Ben Johnson, who then comes in here, handpicks Loveland, handpicks Luther Burden as well. And then on top of that, DJ Moore, who kind of knows what his future is with this team, right? He's kind of been called out by Ben Johnson in terms of block to get the rock and things like he was watching the tape and DJ Moore walking off to the sideline. Odunze, down year 1, 100% a year 2 breakout candidate. Luther Burden, rookie unknown, 100% a rookie breakout candidate. But to me, I think Colston Loveland's as good a bet as any of them to kind of emerge in this offense, and the threshold is much lower, right? Like if he averages 11 points per game, that's a massive win for a tight end. If Rome Odunze averages 11 points per game, it's not that great for where you have to draft him. And when we look at projections here from Nick Ercolano, Colston Loveland, in terms of his receiving line, at 675.5 receiving yards over under, that's more than Matthew Golden, Jayden Higgins, Emeka Egbuka, the other tight end, Tyler Warren, who's actually going ahead of him on Underdog, and then Luther Burden as well. So he's one of the more projectable passing game targets. He was drafted 10th overall. We'll also have this tweet from Dynasty_IM. Only one tight end has ever posted a 34% target share in college. It's Colston Loveland. He's a very good receiving tight end, but he comes from a Michigan system where he was also asked to block. So I'm not as worried about him being this Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts tweener. I think he can do it all, but he specializes in the passing game, which to me is really exciting. And what I would do, especially like an ESPN league, is you draft Colston Loveland here, not with the plan to start him week 1. You draft him, and then you pair him later with either you could probably like double tap, or you go like Njoku Loveland back to back almost, but you could also go Loveland and then late you could go like Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz, guys who project decently well super late that you can play in week 1 until Loveland truly emerges in this offense. Then our 4th breakout candidate here, Tyjae Spears, heading into year 3 now, going to pick 115 as the RB 39 in ESPN leagues. I do want to say he had a brutal 2024. Brutal. Look at this injury history. Ankle sprain, then a hamstring strain, then a concussion, and then another concussion. So you can kind of throw out a lot of 2024 for Tyjae Spears, but what I will say is that he had an amazing playoff run where Tony Pollard gets banged up down the stretch, Spears is the guy, and he averages 20.7 points per game during the fantasy playoffs. Like, he was silently one of the guys where if you wanted to go toe-to-toe versus a Bucky Irving or a Jonathan Taylor as well, Spears was the guy you had to bring to the table, which is just funny to say out loud, but he was. Now, when we go a year back to 2023 as a rookie, he was top 5 in explosive run rate. He was 12th in yards per out run among all running backs with 100 or more carries. He's well-rounded. He's explosive. He's not going to be a 20-plus touch per game guy. He's more in that James Cook, Achane, Gibbs kind of archetype and mold of where you can give him like half of the volume and he might be efficient enough and get enough receptions that he can give you something startable. And then also this Titans offense, especially this late. I know that we just talked down Calvin Ridley, but it's because you have to draft him in round 5 over other breakout candidates like Jameson Williams or George Pickens or Jalen Waddle. You have to spend up for him, especially with other running backs around him too. When we're talking about pick 115, that's a bet or a price I'm willing to make a bet on this offense, right? Where they've invested in the offensive line with J.C. Latham and Skoronski, and Callahan's dad is an amazing offensive line coach. And if Cam Ward is good and this offense does take a step forward, then all of a sudden the running back becomes pretty valuable in this offense. And if Pollard gets banged up, who's also dealt with injuries, all of a sudden Spears is very interesting. Or even if it's a split, I think Spears could be an interesting, like a guy that you're not happy to throw him in the RB2 spot, but can at least be passable for certain matchups. And when we talk about projectable outcomes for these RB2s, we talked about with Jordan Mason the other day, but in terms of Tyjae Spears, who's actually cheaper on Underdog, you can see in terms of their half PPR point per game projections from Mike Clay and Rich Rebar, to me, Spears is one of these guys who isn't a direct handcuff. He has more utility than that, but also it's not like Tony Pollard was a top 50 pick like Trevion Henderson with Ramondre, or even like a Najee getting first-round pick of Marion Hampton. Tyjae Spears, to me, I know he has Pollard in front of him, but it's not the same amount of investment as a first-round NFL draft pick or a second-round NFL draft pick. It's a real ambiguous backfield kind of scenario, and 7+ points per game for a running back you're drafting that late. There's no other running back. Like, he's the cheapest running back that you can project for 7 or more points per game in half PPR at this point. So he's someone I've been mixing in a lot. Now, our 5th breakout candidate, and I think our 2nd rookie on this list, is Jayden Higgins. He's going to pick 123 as the wide receiver 52 over on ESPN. He's inside the top 100 picks on Underdog, and he's really interesting in terms of right now, second rounders. There's something with like guarantees and weird stuff in the contract where like all the owners are banding together on this besides the Texans, where Jayden Higgins is one of the only second rounders to sign a contract. So that's a huge W for him. He's involved in OTAs. He's with the team. There's no sitting out. There's no weird disconnect between him and the team. He is fully installed here. And when we look at Jayden Higgins, he's somebody my prospect model really liked, where my model grades wide receivers by their film score, which is just Draft Capital and NFL.com film grade. Breakout score did they produce early. Height adjusted athleticism is self-explanatory. Efficiency score, so that's just yards per out run and passer rating when targeted. Program quality and early declare. And he comes out as pretty much like the tier gap between lesser receiver prospects like Noel and Kyle Williams, and he's in that gold tier with Matthew Golden, with Luther Burden, with Tedero McMillan. Now he's at the bottom end, right? His projected points per game years 1 through 3, 8.04. But to me, he's the one of these guys where he's just in this same range, drafted 34th overall. One of these guys picked inside the top 40 picks, where this is where a guy like T. Higgins went, a guy like Michael Pittman went, and it's a very fertile spot for receivers to come out and be really good. So I like Jayden Higgins. He is also in a passing offense here that has C.J. Stroud heading into year 3. They get a new OC, Nick Caley, who comes from the McVay tree from the Rams. And I think that he's a great, or just this passing offense is a great post-hype buy, where C.J. Stroud had all these expectations last year. They fall flat. Everyone gets hurt. Slowick gets fired. But now we have a new OC. We have a healthy Nico Collins. We have C.J. Stroud, who was 2023's Jaden Daniels. You can now bet on for super cheap here. And then we have a passing offense that Mike Clay has projected for the 5th most passing yards in the NFL. And after Nico Collins, there's going to be plenty left on the table for others to eat. And I like making that bet on Jayden Higgins, who's almost a clone of Nico Collins, but in a good way, where usually that would be conflicting and overlapping, kind of like redundant archetypes, right? Where Jayden Higgins is 6'4", 214, 4.4 speed. It's crazy how similar they are as athletes, is what I would say. But as players, they're very different. Where he almost falls in this Keon Coleman category for Matt Harmon, where he talks through I feel similarly about Jayden Higgins as I did about Keon Coleman last year. The 2024 prospect was just better. Higgins, like Coleman was as a rookie, can be a usable player if he lines up at X receiver, but he won't be maximized without a little more role catering. That's going to take the right staff with correct vision to get Higgins into the right spots. While there are plenty of imaginative coaches I would trust with this type of project, the league is filled with offensive designers who are more rugged in their approach to wide receiver development and size-based archetypes. And pretty much what he's saying is that Higgins would be best suited not planted on the outside as an X receiver because he's 6'4", 214. And lucky for him, he goes to an offense with Nico Collins, who thrives in the X role, is going to play there pretty much full time, and that now opens up Jayden Higgins to have this like big slot role or play off the line as flanker across the formation from Nico Collins or work off of Nico Collins on the same side. And I think that that's really interesting for Jayden Higgins, where he doesn't have to beat press, right? That's something that Nico Collins does instead, and Jayden Higgins can work off of that kind of duo. So I think that Jayden Higgins is an exciting prospect that landed in a really good spot. There's going to be plenty of passing yards in this offense. I know Christian Kirk is there, I know Knowles there, but in terms of like a big playmaker, Higgins fits that archetype. Now, our sixth breakout candidate here, he's not a rookie, but he's like a red shirt. It was just crazy to say in the NFL, but J.J. McCarthy, he doesn't play last year. The Vikings draft him high. They let Sam Darnold walk, and they're putting all their eggs in the J.J. McCarthy basket. You can draft him QB 18, outside the top 10 rounds in your home league on ESPN, and I just like the fact that he's a pure unknown. We're yet to see what J.J. McCarthy looks like in the NFL. That gives us a lot of upside. He's going to be attached to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, a newly revamped offensive line that PFF just ranked as the 7th best offensive line in the league. They get Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. They get Ryan Kelly, Will Freeze. They get a healthy Christian Darrisaw. And, of course, you have Kevin O'Connell, who just puppeteered Sam Darnold into $50+ million, which is one of the crazier things ever done. He also got Josh Dobbs to look halfway decent. He's gotten Nick Mullins to look halfway decent. He is a really, really good coach, and I think that J.J. McCarthy has a ton of upside in this offense. And something that has been really interesting to me is Ryan Heath has kind of looked into, of course, the late-round archetypes of the past, right? Late-round quarterbacks have been rushing quarterbacks, and it makes a ton of sense, right? When you look through guys like Lamar Jackson in his second year, and you talk about all these guys could be had late, but they're not cheap anymore, right? Like last year, you had to pay up for Jaden Daniels. This year, you're paying up for Justin Fields, who might not start a full 17 games. It's no longer, like last year, you had to pay up for Anthony Richardson as well. It's no longer some hack to draft scrambling quarterbacks. But what he's found is that if you're not going to be a Konami code type scrambling quarterback, rushing quarterback, you got to be in one of these Mick Shanahan offenses, right? Someone who comes from McVay, someone who comes from Shanahan, where if we look at late round hits over the years, we have Stroud, Daniels, Fields, Stafford, Baker, Purdy, Tua, and the ones who weren't scrambling quarterbacks were accomplished with your McVay, Shanahan, tree coaches, right? So when you look at Ryan Heath and what we're projecting towards this year, a few guys fall into this category, one of them being J.J. McCarthy, because Kevin O'Connell was the Rams OC in 2020, 2021. He comes from the same tree, and it's going to be very quarterback friendly in this offense. And on top of that, we have a little bit of rushing upside with J.J. McCarthy as well. We'll look at his rushing fantasy points per snap from college. He's not in that statue C.J. Stroud, Michael Penix, Cam Ward area. He's in this mobile tier with Bo Nix between him and Jackson Dart. So there should be a little bit of ground game. He is going to be pretty much, to me, I think he's going to be very similar to what we've seen from Brock Purdy on the Niners, where I think he's just going to fit in really well. He projects well. Like Vegas is respecting him with these lines and like the 3,800 plus passing yards, 24 plus passing touchdowns. He's going to do it this year if he stays healthy. I think that J.J. McCarthy is going to be one of these late round quarterbacks we look back on as someone that if you didn't draft a Josh Allen early or a Jalen Hurts early can kind of take your team to the promised land without needing those guys. Then our last breakout candidate here is going to be a 2-for-1 special. Our 7th breakout is technically 7 and 8, but it's just the Rams running backs. It's Blake Corum, it's Jarquez Hunter. I wanted to show this here. I'm drafting both of them. Like essentially I'm trying to finish drafts with one of them. If I need a running back in the 18th round on Underdog, I'm taking Corum, I'm taking Jarquez Hunter, and it just kind of extends from our talk the other day about Kyron Williams, where I think we're going to see a much bigger split in this backfield. This was a Rams team last year that was dead last in explosive run rate, and we already have quotes saying the amount of wear and tear that goes into running backs, that having a committee with different skill sets is going to help us be able to run the ball the way we would like to. McVay at the bottom here from Coach Speak Index has a little bit more versatility in his 2025 offense. notes how impressed he was by the variety of personnel groupings and runs in Liam Cohen's Bucs offense. So I think that we're going to see this be the most spread running back room that we've ever seen with Sean McVay. And for that reason, I don't know why I'm saying for that reasons, but with this running offense, Kyren Williams is someone who gets banged up a ton. He came into the NFL with injury issues. I don't even think that you need an injury to Kyren for one of these guys to pay off. I think that one of them could just run away with the job. For me, I like Corum for the fact that he had third-round draft capital invested in him, and he already knows the system. But I also like Jarquez Hunter as well. I'm drafting both of them. Jarquez Hunter, much more explosive when we look at their college stats here from Football Insights. Jarquez Hunter across the board in terms of yards after contact, missed tackles forced, runs of 10-plus yards, completely dusts Kyren and Blake Corum in this category. And I think that McVay wants this offense to be more explosive. So I could 100% see Hunter being the guy as well. I don't have a lean between the two of them. I'd probably put Hunter 1A, Blake Corum 1B, just because we already saw a year of Blake Corum. He didn't really do anything, and Hunter's the mystery box. But I think one of these two guys will end up being a league winner in 2025. Now, that's going to do it for us today. If you want access to my full rankings, my top 200 redraft rankings right now, I just updated them today for the Quinshon Judkins stuff and some other things going on, right, with like the Jawan Jennings holdout. That is all going to be on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. My Underdog rankings are already uploaded there that you can use on Underdog. In season, you'll get my weekly rankings, rest of season rankings, access to subscriber leagues, all that good stuff and more. Patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can find in the description and the comment section down below. But if you can't support there, just leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like